The beacon shouldn't have been active. 700 light-years from Earth in the cold between stars, where nothing lived and nothing moved, an automated monitoring station registered an energy spike. 0.37 seconds later, the spike doubled, then tripled. The station's AI had one function. It had performed this function without incident for 43 years. Monitor, record, transmit. It monitored. Deep beneath the surface of a lifeless moon, something that had been sleeping for 10,000 years was waking up. The energy readings climbed, not gradually, exponentially. The kind of curve that meant either a star was being born or something was coming back from the dead. The AI recorded everything: temperature fluctuations in the lunar core, electromagnetic distortions spreading outward in perfect geometric patterns, power signatures that matched nothing in human databases except one entry. One file buried so deep in military archives that accessing it required authorization from 3 separate admirals. The file was labeled Crisis Event 2072. The AI transmitted. Across 700 light-years of emptiness, through the quantum-entangled relays that humanity had built to span the dark, a message traveled at speeds that made light seem slow. It reached Earth in 11 seconds. It reached the right people in 14. Those people had been waiting 80 years for this message. They had hoped it would never come. On the lunar surface above the facility, dust that hadn't moved since the universe was young began to shift. Not from wind. There was no wind. From vibration. From something beneath the crust that was testing its systems, charging its reactors, remembering what it had been built to do. The facility, designated Obsidian 7, had 3 purposes: replicate, expand, eliminate. For 10,000 years it had done none of these things. Some ancient war had damaged it, left it dormant, left it waiting in the dark for a trigger that might never come. The trigger had come. 97 seconds after the first energy spike, a section of the lunar surface 3 kilometers wide simply opened. No explosive decompression, no violent rupture. It opened the way a flower opens, precise, geometric, inevitable. From the darkness below, something emerged. It was 12 meters long, angular, made from materials that absorbed light rather than reflected it. No windows, no crew compartments, no space for anything biological, just systems, just purpose. It hovered above the lunar surface for exactly 4 seconds, scanning, analyzing, learning what had changed in 10,000 years. Then it began to build. The machine extended appendages that moved too fast for human eyes to track. They touched the lunar regolith, and the regolith began to change. Molecular bonds broke and reformed. Silicon became something else. Iron became something new. In 47 seconds, the machine had constructed an exact copy of itself. 2 machines became 4. 4 became 8. 8 became 16. By the time the monitoring station's second transmission reached Earth, there were 128 machines on that lifeless moon, and they were building faster. 3,000 light-years away, Ambassador Seraphine Thora stood at the observation window of the Harmony's Voice and watched a blue-green planet rotate slowly in the distance. She had stood this way for nearly an hour, 4 arms clasped behind her back, in the posture her people adopted during moments of profound contemplation. Her skin, the pale blue-green of deep ocean water, seemed to glow faintly in the starlight. Her eyes, amber and unblinking, tracked the cloud patterns swirling across Earth's surface. Beautiful, she thought. They always were, these young worlds, these species taking their first steps into the infinite. Behind her, the bridge of the Harmony's voice hummed with the quiet efficiency of a ship that had been doing this for 3,000 years. Crew members from 17 different species moved through their duties with practiced grace. The air smelled faintly of ozone and something sweet that Seraphine had never quite identified. Home, perhaps, or as close to home as a diplomatic vessel could provide. Kael Viren approached with the careful steps of someone who knew interrupting contemplation was dangerous but necessary. He was young for a Zenthri, barely 67 years old. His skin still held the brighter blue of youth, not yet faded to Seraphine's deeper shade. He carried a data tablet in both upper hands. His lower hands were empty, relaxed. A good sign. Ambassador. His voice had the harmonic quality of their species, like wind through crystal caves. The final survey scans are complete. Seraphine turned from the window, slowly. She had learned long ago that sudden movements made younger species nervous. Tell me what we're seeing, Kael. The humans have established 7 permanent colonies within their solar system. 3 on planetary bodies, 4 on constructed orbital platforms. He scrolled through data with one finger. Their faster-than-light technology is functional but elementary, short jump ranges, significant energy cost per transit. Weapons. Energy weapons effective at close range but lacking the yield to threaten capital ships. Defensive shielding is standard for a species at their level of development. He paused, met her eyes. All metrics point to a clean Tier 3 classification, Ambassador. They are precisely where we expected them to be. Seraphine nodded slowly. Tier 3, young, vulnerable, in need of guidance. The pattern she had seen 51 times before in 400 years of service. Political structure, she asked, unified. The United Earth government operates with a bicameral council representing all major regional bodies, remarkably stable given they achieved it only 42 years ago. Kael's admiration was obvious in his tone, and was, most species arrived at the stars still fractured by old borders and older grudges. These humans had unified before they left their own solar system. That spoke well of them. That spoke of wisdom beyond their years. Prepare the diplomatic gifts, Seraphine said. She rolled her shoulders in the way of her people when settling into action. A gesture that meant decision-made path chosen, no turning back. Standard package. Information crystals, medical archives, agricultural frameworks, clean energy schematics. Already arranged, Ambassador. And ensure the greeting has been translated into all major human languages. All of them. I will not have them feel we prioritize one culture over another. Of course. Seraphine allowed herself a small smile. Today they would add the 48th voice to the chorus of the galactic concordat. Let them make a proper introduction. She did not know, could not know, that on a moon 700 light-years away, the machines had stopped building at exactly 5,000 units. Not because they had run out of materials, because 5,000 was sufficient for the next phase. The machines were moving, and their destination had already been calculated. The Harmony's voice moved through the outer solar system with the dignified patience of an elder arriving at a gathering. Unhurried, confident, aware of the impression being made. They passed Jupiter, its storm systems visible even from this distance. A planet-sized bruise of amber and cream, beautiful in its violence. They passed Saturn, whose rings seemed almost offensively elegant for a world of pure gas. They noted the small monitoring stations at the system's edge. Modest constructions, barely more than sensor arrays with life support attached. Someone was watching. That much was clear, but no one hailed them with alarm. No one moved to intercept. They're observing us, Kael said from his station. Multiple passive scans, but no active targeting. "They know we come in peace," Seraphine replied, "or they're simply not threatened by one ship." Either interpretation was encouraging. What Seraphine didn't see, what her sensors weren't designed to detect, were the conversations happening on those monitoring stations. The calm professional reports being transmitted earthward on encrypted channels. The way technicians noted every detail of the Harmony's voice with the precision of people who had been trained to recognize threats. On Jupiter Station Juno 7, a young woman named Lyra Park sat at her console and watched the alien vessel pass. She was 28 years old, born 3 years after the crisis ended, raised on stories of the 5-year war that had killed 30% of humanity and almost ended everything. She pressed a single button. "Unity Station, this is Juno 7. Contact confirmed. Initiating protocol Gamma 7. The response came immediately. A man's voice, deep, Texan accent, the kind of voice that commanded fleets. "Acknowledged Juno 7. All defense platforms moving to Condition 2. Outer system patrols report all contacts." And Lyra, "Yes, Admiral. Tell science to analyze those shield harmonics. I want to know exactly what kind of protection they're running." "Understood, sir." The channel closed. Lyra looked at her co-worker, a man named Torres, who had been doing this job for 15 years. He was old enough to remember the crisis, old enough to have scars. "Think they're friendly?" Lyra asked. Torres didn't look up from his screens. "Don't matter if they're friendly, matters if they're a threat. Admiral Kellerman wants to know what we're dealing with before we shake hands." "They came alone. One ship. That's not exactly an invasion force." "The Reapers came with 12 units first time." Torres's voice was flat, empty of emotion in the way of people who had learned not to feel. 12 became 5,000 in 3 weeks. You don't judge intentions by what shows up first. You judge by what could show up next. Lyra said nothing. She was too young to remember, but she had been raised by people who couldn't forget. On her screen, the Harmony's voice continued its stately approach toward Earth. Beautiful, elegant, completely unaware that every weapons platform in human space had just been given firing solutions, just in case. Unity Station hung in Earth orbit like a geometric moon, angular, functional, larger than Seraphine had expected for a species only 30 years into space travel. It was no marvel by Concordat standards, but it was solid, well-maintained, built with clear intention for expansion. They had planned for growth. That spoke of optimism, of belief in a future worth building toward. The shuttle docked with a gentle mechanical sigh. Pressure equalized. The doors parted. Secretary General Elena Vasquez stood at the head of a small delegation. Seraphine's first impression was of a woman who had not come to be impressed. Elena Vasquez was perhaps 60 years old in human terms, close-cropped silver hair, eyes the color of aged oak, warm in tone but sharp in focus. She wore a dark blue uniform that was immaculate without being ornamental. The humans flanking her were equally composed, equally watchful. Something about them made Seraphine's instincts prickle. The way they stood, the way their eyes tracked movement. These were not politicians playing at formality. These were veterans who had seen things that changed people. "Welcome to Unity Station." Eleanor's Concordat standard was flawless, completely without accent. "I am Secretary General Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Government. We are honored by your presence." Seraphine bowed in Concordat manner. "I am Ambassador Seraphine Thora of the Galactic Concordat. We come bearing friendship and an invitation to join the great community of civilized worlds." She spread 2 of her 4 arms in a gesture of openness, a gesture that had worked on 51 previous occasions. A gesture that said, "We are here to help, to guide, to welcome you into something larger than yourselves." Elena smiled. Polite, practiced, revealing nothing. "We are grateful for your generous offer, Ambassador. However, we would appreciate some time to review your proposal carefully before offering a formal response. Would 48 hours be acceptable?" The words landed like stones dropped into still water, ripples spreading outward, disturbing everything. Seraphine blinked. Once, twice. In 400 years of diplomatic service across 51 first contacts, not one species had ever requested review time. Young species didn't request time. They asked questions, certainly. Wide-eyed, eager questions about the Concordat, about other species, about the galaxy that had just opened before them like a book. But they didn't treat the greatest diplomatic offer in the history of their civilization as something requiring 48 hours of deliberation. They didn't respond to proof of alien life, to confirmation that they were not alone in the infinite universe, with the calm composure of bureaucrats reviewing a contract. Of course, Seraphine's diplomatic training was so deeply ingrained that the surprise barely touched her voice. "Take whatever time you need." "Excellent." Eleanor extended her hand in the human greeting gesture. A brief, firm clasp of palms. "We'll arrange comfortable accommodations aboard the station if you prefer to remain during the deliberation period. We will return to our vessel, but we appreciate the offer." The handshake was professional, controlled. Elena's grip showed no tremor, no hesitation. Her eyes never left Seraphine's. And in that gaze the ambassador saw something that made her centuries of experience suddenly feel inadequate. These humans were not afraid, they were not awed, they were assessing. As the shuttle carried the Concordat delegation back toward the Harmony's voice, Seraphine sat very still. Around her, Kale and the others processed their confusion quietly. No one spoke. Seraphine turned the encounter over in her mind, examined it from every angle. No excitement, no wonder, no relief. These humans had just met their first alien species, confirmed proof that they were not alone in an infinite universe, and their primary representative had been as composed as someone attending a budget meeting. The shuttle bay doors of Unity Station closed behind them. Inside, Elena Vasquez watched the departing craft for a long moment. Then she turned to the aide standing at attention beside her. Her expression hardened. The diplomatic warmth vanished like switching off a light. "Inform Admiral Kellerman they bought it." The aide nodded once and disappeared. Elena stood alone in the bay. Her right hand trembled slightly. Just once. A small betrayal of the iron control she maintained, because she knew something the Concordat didn't. Something that would change everything when they finally understood. 82 years ago, humanity had screamed into the void for help. They had broadcast distress signals on every frequency they could generate. For 4 years straight. While their worlds burned and their people died and machines that should have been extinct hunted them through the dark. No one had come. And humanity had learned a lesson that could not be unlearned. That peace was not the natural state of the universe. That survival required preparation. That trust had to be earned, not freely given. They had learned to smile while calculating exactly how long it would take to reduce a threat to atoms. Elena left the bay. Behind her, automated systems began scanning the Concordat shuttle's energy signature, recording shield frequencies, analyzing propulsion systems, building targeting solutions, just in case. Seraphine called an emergency meeting in the ship's intelligence center before the crew had finished logging the visit. The room was small and deliberately unadorned, bare walls, circular table, harsh lighting. It was a room designed for honesty, for saying things that couldn't be said on the comfortable bridge. "Something is wrong." Seraphine spoke without preamble, without apology, just fact. Their response profile does not match the model. Speak freely. Crystallis moved to the center console. The intelligence officer's body was a roughly humanoid arrangement of interlocking mineral formations that clicked and chimed softly with each movement. Crystalline species communicated data in patterns of resonance. Crystallis was extraordinarily good at finding things other analysts missed. I have been passively monitoring accessible frequencies of human communication since our arrival. The crystals along Crystallis's left arm pulsed as the display activated. With your authorization, Ambassador, I would like to share what I found. Proceed. The first audio intercept played through the room speakers. Human voices, clipped and professional, speaking in a rapid cadence that suggested training rather than panic. Fleet Command, this is Unity Station. The Concordate delegation has returned to their vessel. Initiate Protocol Gamma 7. Unity Station acknowledged. All defense platforms moving to Condition 2. Outer System patrols report all contacts. Admiral Kellerman requests full capability assessment of the alien vessel. Science teams begin analysis of shield harmonics. Prioritize reactor signature. Seraphine said nothing for a moment. The silence in the room was absolute. Condition 2, Kale said slowly. That's a combat readiness designation. Confirmed, Crystallis chimed. Not full alert, but elevated. They raised it the moment we left their station. They might simply be cautious, Kale offered. His voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. Prudent, even. First contact with an unknown species. They were analyzing our shield harmonics. Seraphine's voice was quiet. Dangerous. Not our communication signature. Not our navigation systems. Our shields. The room was quiet. Crystallis played the second intercept. When do we inform the Concordate delegation about the Titan class? A pause. Then a different voice, older, weighted with authority. Not yet. Admiral Kellerman wants to let them make their full offer first. Let them show us what they think of us before we show our cards. Understood? Understood. The Indomitable should reach the outer system in approximately 26 hours. The recording ended. In the silence that followed, Seraphine became aware of how still her crew had gone. Even Kale Young and idealistic Kale, who believed in the Concordate with the fervor of someone who had never seen it fail, looked shaken. Titan class, Seraphine said carefully. Crystallis. The term appears repeatedly in military communications, always flagged at the highest encryption levels. We cannot access the associated data. The intelligence officer's crystals dimmed, the equivalent of a troubled expression. Whatever it is significant enough that they protect information about it more carefully than they protect anything else. A warship of some kind, Kale said. Tier 3 species typically have small defense vessels. It's probably nothing exceptional by Concordate standards, more symbolic than militarily relevant. A matter of pride. Seraphine looked at him for a long moment. Perhaps, she said. But even as she said it, she felt something cold settling into her chest. An instinct honed over 4 centuries. A feeling that had kept her alive through situations that should have killed her. These humans were different. Pull all archived data on human history, she ordered. Everything. I want to know who they were before they reached the stars. I want to know what shaped them. Ambassador, we have 26 hours before this Indomitable arrives. Then we have 26 hours to understand what we're actually dealing with. Seraphine stood, 4 arms moving in unconscious patterns of stress. Something is coming, something they've been waiting to show us, and I want to know why they waited. She left the room. Behind her, Crystallis and Kyle exchanged looks that needed no translation. Across 700 light-years of space on a moon that had been dead for 10,000 years, 5,000 machines finished their preparations. They had built, they had replicated, they had remembered their purpose. Now they moved. 5,000 machines launched from the lunar surface in perfect geometric formation. No hesitation, no individual variation, just collective intelligence pursuing a collective goal. They entered faster than light travel with technology that predated every known civilization, technology that worked not by bending space but by cutting through it, leaving scars in reality that would take centuries to heal. Their destination had been programmed 10,000 years ago. Updated now with new data, new targets, new priorities, they were going to find the nearest concentration of biological life. They were going to do what they had been built to do. And they had 23 days to get there before humanity's early warning systems would detect them coming. 23 days before everything Seraphine thought she understood about this first contact would burn to ash. But for now, in the quiet of her quarters aboard the Harmony's Voice, surrounded by holographic projections of human history, Seraphine studied the records of a species that had survived things that should have killed them. Wars, plagues, environmental collapse, every time brought to the edge of extinction, every time clawing their way back. She read their philosophies, their defiant refusal to accept defeat, their conviction that the universe did not have the right to beat them, and she began slowly to understand. These were not children reaching hopefully toward the stars. These were survivors who had looked into the abyss and learned to stare back. The question was, what had they seen down there in the dark? In 26 hours, she would find out. 26 hours felt like 26 years. Seraphine spent them in her quarters surrounded by holographic projections of human history that floated in the air like luminous ghosts. 10,000 years of recorded civilization suspended around her in soft blue light. She moved through it slowly. The way an archaeologist moves through ruins, looking for the shape of things beneath the surface. What she found disturbed her deeply. Humans fought. That alone wasn't extraordinary. Most species had violent histories. Blood was the price evolution charged for intelligence. But humans fought differently, with a pathological refusal to accept defeat that bordered on madness. Every time their civilization had been brought to the edge, and it had been brought there many times, disease, climate collapse, nuclear war, resource depletion. They had clawed their way back. Not gracefully, not easily, but they had come back. Every single time. There was a stubbornness woven into their nature that went beyond survival instinct. It was almost philosophical. A deep, furious conviction that the universe did not have the right to beat them. Most Tier 3 species looked outward with wonder and fragility. Humanity looked outward with the eyes of something that had already been tested. Seraphine was reading a military text from their pre-space era, written by a general who had survived catastrophic defeat and rebuilt his forces from nothing when Crystallis's voice cut through the ship's communication system. "Ambassador, you need to come to the bridge." The tone, measured and controlled in the way of someone who had already processed their shock and moved beyond it. That tone told Seraphine everything she needed to know. Whatever waited on that bridge would change things. She was right. Space at the edge of the solar system was behaving incorrectly. That was how Crystallis described it, and it was the most accurate description available. The geometry of space itself was wrong, bent and distorted by something massive forcing its way through the dimensional fold of faster-than-light travel. Seraphine stood at the primary sensor station and watched the readings climb with a sick feeling settling into her chest. The energy signature was equivalent to a small star undergoing controlled ignition. "What is coming through?" she asked. "I cannot tell you yet." Crystallis's crystals flickered in patterns Seraphine had never seen before. Alarm colors. "The distortion is too severe for precise measurement, But the mass displacement alone— The intelligence officer paused, recalibrated. The crystals turned a deep violet that meant confusion bordering on disbelief. Ambassador, the mass displacement alone exceeds 12 million metric tons. The entire bridge went quiet. 12 million tons. The Harmony's voice. A ship designed to carry delegations from 17 species across thousands of light years massed 400,000 tons. This thing emerging from FTL was 30 times larger. Then, space tore open. It didn't fold the way Concordat drives worked, smoothly, surgically, a controlled manipulation of space-time that left no scars. It tore, like fabric pulled apart by something too large to care about the damage, like the universe itself was screaming. From the wound in reality, a ship emerged. TERRIFYIN had seen warships before. Every species in the Concordat maintained defensive fleets. She had toured vessels from cultures that had been building spacecraft for 5,000 years. She thought she understood what military power looked like. She understood nothing. The vessel was 12 kilometers from bow to stern. 12 kilometers. A flying city built for one purpose. Its hull was matte black. The kind of black that didn't reflect light but absorbed it. Rendered their scan beams nearly useless. The armor was layered in great geometric slabs that overlapped like the scales of some ancient oceanic predator. Functional, brutal, beautiful in the way that apex predators are beautiful. Across its surface, covering every visible angle, were weapon ports. TERRIFYIN started counting, stopped at 200, started again, stopped at 470. There were more. Concealed housings, retracted systems, things her sensors couldn't penetrate. The primary cannons, there were 12 of them, had barrels wider than the Harmony's voice's entire midsection. Point defense turrets studded the hull like thorns. Each one was the size of a ground transport vehicle. Launch bay hatches lined the flanks, big enough to deploy entire squadrons of fighters. Behind it, moving in perfect, disciplined formation, came 20 destroyer-class warships. Each one was comparable to the Harmony's voice in size. Each one moved with the precision of military veterans who had done this 1,000 times before. A communication signal opened. A voice came through. Human, female, calm and utterly unremarkable in tone, like someone reporting a weather pattern. This is the USS Indomitable *class Titan warship, Captain Rebecca Strauss commanding. We are attending the diplomatic proceedings currently underway in this system. Please transmit docking coordinates at your earliest convenience. Thank you. No one on the bridge of the Harmony's voice moved for nearly 10 seconds. TERRIFYIN stared at the ship. She had stopped counting weapon ports. Her mind had stopped processing the numbers because the numbers had stopped making sense. This wasn't a warship in any conventional understanding. This was a mobile weapons platform that could fight entire fleets and win. Full tactical analysis, she said. Her voice came out steadier than she deserved credit for. Everything. Now. Crystallis worked in the rapid, silent way of deep concentration. The intelligence officer's crystalline body flickered through colors TERRIFYIN didn't have names for. Processing data, cross-referencing databases, running calculations that should have been impossible. 12,437,000 metric tons. Crystallis's voice had gone flat, emotionless, the way people sound when they're reporting something they don't want to believe. Approximate armor composition is partially unknown. Our scans deflect from the outer layer, which suggests an exotic alloy or composite we have not encountered. Weapons. 473 weapon ports identified, though I suspect there are concealed additional emplacements. Shields. Active. Adaptive frequency modulation, the kind that cycles through different harmonics faster than most targeting systems can lock. Reactor output. Crystallis stopped. The crystals went dark for a moment. When they lit again, they were the deep crimson of something close to fear. Ambassador, the reactor output exceeds any power generation system in the Concordat fleet by a factor of 8.3. I want to be precise about this. Not 8%. A factor of 8. If I am reading these measurements correctly, and I have checked them 4 times, this single vessel generates more operational energy than our entire defensive battle group combined. Kael sat down heavily in a navigation chair, like his legs had simply made a decision without consulting the rest of him. "How did we miss this?" Seraphine demanded, not of anyone in particular, of herself, of the universe. "Our initial scans of the system. How did we not detect a ship of this size?" "It was not in the system," Crystallis replied. "It has been in faster-than-light travel, returning from somewhere the humans refer to in their communications as the outer reaches. The journey apparently took several weeks." A pause. The crystals flickered orange. Uncertainty. "Ambassador, if they built one ship of this class, they built more." The full weight of the situation settled onto Seraphine's shoulders like gravity suddenly doubling. She stood at the center of her bridge and looked at each member of her crew in turn. Every face carried some version of the same expression, the specific disorientation of people whose map of the world had just proven incorrect. "We proceed with dignity," she said quietly. "The humans have not threatened us. They have been in every exchange entirely courteous. But we proceed with honesty now, no more assumptions." She straightened her ceremonial robes with all 4 arms, a gesture of composure she didn't entirely feel. "Let's go find out who we've actually been speaking with." The conference room felt different the second time. Seraphine noticed it the moment she entered. Details she had filed as background information during the first meeting now assembled themselves into meaning. The walls were reinforced. The composite alloy beneath the decorative panels was unmistakably military grade. She could see the seams now, could recognize the construction patterns of people who built for war, not aesthetics. The corridor intersections she had passed were equipped with retracted automated defense turrets, subtle enough that a first-time visitor might miss them, obvious enough that a careful observer would not. Every human she had seen on Unity Station moved with the economy of motion that came not from training alone, but from genuine operational experience. These were veterans, all of them. This was not a diplomatic station that happened to have defenses. It was a military installation that also handled diplomacy. The human delegation was already seated, Elena Vasquez at the center. But this time a man sat beside her. He had not been present at the first meeting. Admiral Drayton Kellerman. Seraphine recognized the rank insignia, recognized the way the other humans deferred to him without obvious gesture. This was a man who commanded fleets, who made decisions that determined whether civilizations lived or died. He was perhaps 58 years old, grey hair cut short in military fashion, eyes the color of winter steel. His uniform was identical to Elena's, dark blue and immaculate, but he wore it differently, like armor, like something he had earned through blood. The officers flanking them had the quiet watchfulness of people who understood threats in ways that words struggled to capture. Eleanor folded her hands on the table. The gesture was precise, controlled. "Ambassador Thora, we have considered the Concordat's generous offer of membership. We have considered it carefully and with the respect it deserves." She paused. In that pause, Seraphine felt the shape of what was coming. "We must respectfully decline junior membership status." The words arrived like stones dropped into absolute silence. 3,000 years. 51 first contacts. Not one species had refused the Concordat. Not one. Some had asked for more time. Some had negotiated specific terms. Some had expressed reservations that were ultimately resolved through patient dialogue. But no species, not one in the entire recorded history of the Concordat, had looked at an offer of protection, knowledge trade, and brotherhood and said no. I see. Seraphine was proud of how even her voice remained, how little the shock showed. May I ask why? Eleanor glanced at Admiral Kellerman. A brief exchange that carried volumes. Then she returned her gaze to Seraphine. Your offer is built on an assumption, Ambassador. The assumption is that Earth is young, inexperienced, and in need of guidance and protection. From your perspective, from any perspective based on the data available to you, that assumption is entirely reasonable. Another pause. But the assumption is wrong. The indomitable suggests as much. Seraphine said quietly. Admiral Kellerman leaned forward. For the first time, the professional calm behind his eyes gave way to something older and harder. Something that had been forged in circumstances Seraphine could only imagine. Ambassador, before I explain further, I need to ask you something. His voice had a Texan drawl that softened the edges of his words. But there was steel underneath. In all your records, all the Concordats' accumulated knowledge of the galaxy, have you ever encountered evidence of a self-replicating machine intelligence, one designed specifically, exclusively, and efficiently for war? The temperature in the room did not change, but every member of the Concordat delegation went very still. Seraphine felt her hearts, both of them, begin to beat faster. You mean, she said slowly, the Reapers? The word landed differently than she had expected it to. The humans did not flinch. They did not react with the alarm of people hearing a legendary horror invoked. They reacted the way people react when someone finally uses the correct name for something they have lived alongside. You know of them, Elena said quietly. Not a question, an observation. We know their remnants. Dead machines found on dead worlds at the edge of explored space, ancient and inactive. We believe them to be relics of some prehistoric conflict, possibly predating the Concordat's own founding. Seraphine's voice had dropped. We did not believe them to be a current threat. Kellerman's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. A flicker of something that might have been vindication, or sorrow, or both. 82 years ago, he said, a dormant Reaper facility in an uncharted system at the far edge of what you call the outer reaches reactivated. Silence. And for the next 5 years, humanity fought them alone. The room transformed. Holographic displays ignited across the walls. The polished diplomatic setting vanished, replaced by combat footage. Raw, unedited, immediate. What played across those walls in the next minutes was a comprehensive and devastating portrait of humanity's worst nightmare. The footage was not staged. That was the first thing that struck Seraphine, the terrible authenticity of it. No careful angles, no managed narrative. Just the stuttering visual record of military engagement systems, medical facility, monitoring feeds, civilian communication networks, all woven together into a tapestry of catastrophe. Date stamp, March 15th, 2078. Location, Mars orbit. A human fleet hung in formation above the red planet. 47 warships. They looked nothing like the Indomitable. These were older designs, conventional, built before humanity understood what they would need to survive. Against them, 890 Reaper units, geometric obsidian shapes that moved with the precision of collective intelligence, no crew compartments, no life support, just systems, just purpose. The battle opened. Human missiles launched, thousands of them. Railgun fire lit up the dark like lightning, Plasma cannons discharged in brilliant blue-white flashes. The Reaper's shields shimmered, absorbed 90% of the damage. What got through cratered their hulls but didn't stop them. Second volley, same weapons, 40% less effective. Third volley, the Reaper shields had optimized. Weapons bounced off like rain on glass. They adapted. Kellerman's voice was steady as he narrated. Every tactic that worked against them in the first engagement failed in the second because they had already learned, already compensated, already evolved their response. The Reapers counterattacked. Particle beams, precise, surgical. A human destroyer, the USS Constellation, took a direct hit to its reactor core. The ship didn't explode cinematically. It simply stopped being a ship. Vaporized, reduced to molecular debris, 340 crew members, gone in less than a second. Seraphine watched a massive orbital station, Deimos Station. She counted the docking arms and estimated its population, 60,000, maybe more. Evacuation shuttles were launching, thousands of them, but they were too slow. There wasn't enough time. A single Reaper particle beam struck the station's central support column. The station didn't explode. It processed, metal superheated, vaporized. The structure came apart in absolute silence, because space doesn't carry sound, but the visual was deafening anyway. 43,000 naval personnel in that engagement, plus approximately 60,000 civilians who could not complete evacuation in the available window. Kellerman said it without any attempt to minimize. The numbers were what they were. Kale made a small, involuntary sound beside Seraphine. On her other side, Crystallis's entire form had contracted, a defensive posture, colors cycling through distress patterns. Seraphine did not look away. The footage shifted. Date stamp, November 11th, 2079. Location, Denver, Earth, dawn breaking over a city skyline. Beautiful. Peaceful. Then the sky turned white. Orbital bombardment. The shockwave flattened buildings in a 50-kilometer radius. The firestorm that followed consumed everything the initial blast had spared. Cut to underground shelter, handheld camera footage, civilians packed tight, children crying, a woman holding a small girl, maybe 8 years old, singing a lullaby to drown out the sounds above. The ceiling cracked, dust fell. The woman's voice broke, but she kept singing. 340,000 casualties, immediate. Eleanor Vasquez watched this footage with a stone face, but her right hand trembled. Just once. A small betrayal of the iron control she maintained. Seraphine understood. This was Elena's story, her city, her people, possibly her daughter. The footage continued. A montage of 5 years compressed into minutes. 7 colonies destroyed, not damaged, not evacuated, destroyed. Orbital bombardment, ground invasion, systematic elimination. Earth's surface burned, Mars colonies fell, the outer system installations went dark one by one, and through it all, humanity fought. With ships that couldn't win, with weapons that stopped working after 3 uses, with tactics that became obsolete the moment they succeeded. They lost 70% of their fleet in the first year. They lost 3 colonies in the second. By year 4, they were down to 11 warships, and Earth itself was under siege. But they did not surrender. The footage showed scientists in hazmat suits examining a damaged Reaper unit, working 72-hour shifts, surviving on stimulants and desperation. Reverse engineering technology they barely understood. Slowly, painfully, learning, understanding how Reaper shields worked, what frequencies their weapons operated on, how their armor was composed, how their reactors generated power. The footage showed construction bays, a ship being built, massive, the scale incomprehensible. Workers looked tiny against the hull, welding sparks like stars, the prototype that would become the Indomitable. Elena took over the narration. Her voice was quiet, controlled, but underneath it Seraphine could hear the weight of memory. The crisis lasted 5 years. In that time, Earth's surface sustained orbital bombardment. 7 of our planetary colonies were destroyed, completely. Not damaged, not evacuated, destroyed. She paused. Let that land. We lost approximately 30% of our total population. Another pause. Longer. We sent distress signals in every direction, on every frequency we could generate. We broadcast continuously for 4 years, hoping that someone, anyone, in this enormous galaxy might hear us and respond. The silence in the room was excruciating. No one came. 3,000 years of pride in the Concordat's role as protector of the vulnerable. And 80 years ago, a species had been screaming into the dark, and they had never even heard it. The facility had been in uncharted space, beyond any surveyed region. There was no blame to assign. The Concordat couldn't have known humanity existed, but understanding that didn't dissolve the weight of it. Seraphine closed her eyes for just a moment. When she opened them, Elena was watching her. "We don't blame you, Ambassador. You couldn't have known we existed. The location was beyond your explored territories." Eleanor chose her words with great care. "But the experience taught us who we had to be." Kellerman activated new displays. Engineering schematics, dense with technical notation. We recovered what we could of Reaper technology. We studied it. We understood how their shields worked, what frequencies their weapons operated on, how their armor was composed, how their reactors generated power. He gestured toward the schematics of the USS Indomitable. And then our engineers spent a decade answering one question. What would a ship have to look like to fight one of these things and win? The specifications scrolled past. Armor capable of withstanding Reaper particle beams through sustained engagement. Redundant systems so comprehensive that battle damage required the destruction of multiple backup arrays before any primary system failed. Reactors generating enough power to maintain shields under fire that would reduce a conventional warship to vapor. Weapons designed from recovered Reaper components. Weapons that could actually penetrate their defenses. The Titan-class vessels are not warships in the conventional sense, Ambassador. Kellerman met her eyes directly. They are the physical embodiment of a lesson written in 30% of our population, written in the names of 7 colonies that no longer exist, written in children who never got to grow up. Seraphine stood slowly, walked to the star map that still glowed on the room's primary display. She studied it with different eyes now. Not the comfortable map of explored, peaceful, Concordat-protected space she had always known. A map with edges she was only beginning to understand. "How many Titan-class vessels?" she asked. Another of those brief exchanges between Eleanor and Kellerman. Kellerman gave a single small nod. 5. Elena's voice was steady. The USS Indomitable, the USS Eternal Vigil, the USS Thunder's Resolve, the USS Last Light, and the USS Prometheus Rising. Pause. Each commands its own battle group. Each is positioned in a different sector of human space covering all primary approach vectors. Another pause. And each one can operate independently for extended periods in hostile conditions without requiring support. 5 ships, each one capable of challenging the entire Concordat defensive fleet, deployed across human territory like watchtowers, like guardians standing watch over something precious. Seraphine turned from the map. The Reaper facility, the one that activated 80 years ago, You said you destroyed the active units. All of them, Kellerman confirmed. But the facility itself was only partially destroyed. Our scientists assessed the remaining structure and concluded that full destruction would require weapons we couldn't safely deploy near populated systems. He met her eyes steadily. And we've found 3 more. Dormant. Damaged from what appears to be ancient conflicts predating any known civilization, but potentially functional. Crystallis's crystals flashed sharp amber, the alarm frequency. Elena brought up the full star chart. Concordate space glowed blue, vast, well-mapped, safe. Human space was smaller but dense, glowing green. Beyond them both, stretching in every direction, was darkness, unmapped regions spreading like an ocean without shores. We've been conducting long-range patrols in the frontier zones for 40 years, mapping, monitoring, looking for signs of activation. Elena's voice was quiet now. We found the 3 dormant facilities I mentioned. We've also found other things, anomalies we don't yet understand, structures that don't match Reaper profiles, but don't match anything else in our records either. She looked at Seraphine. Ambassador the Concordat has maintained peace for 3,000 years. That is a genuinely extraordinary achievement, and we mean that without irony. But that peace has existed within a sphere, a defined, surveyed, protected sphere. You've stayed inside what is safe. You've not gone to the edges. Pause. The edges have things in them, and they will eventually come to you whether you go to them or not. Seraphine stood at the star map for a long time, looking at the darkness beyond the borders of everything she had always called the known galaxy. 3,000 years of peace, purchased partly through careful limitation, staying within surveyed space, avoiding the unknown, building a beautiful civilization inside manageable walls. It was not cowardice, it was wisdom, or what had seemed like wisdom. But the unknown did not honor walls. She turned from the map at last. You said you declined junior membership. You did not say you declined membership entirely. For the first time in either of their meetings, Elena smiled in a way that reached all the way to her eyes. Ambassador, we would very much like to join the Galactic Concordat. We believe in exactly what it represents. Cooperation, shared knowledge, peace between civilizations. We believe in it deeply. She spread her hands on the table. We are simply asking to join as what we are. We are not children hoping to be educated and protected. We are a civilization that survived a war of annihilation and chose, despite everything it cost us, to still believe in building rather than destroying. Pause. We're asking to join as equals, and we're offering something in return. What you have learned, Seraphine said slowly. What we have learned, Kellerman confirmed, how to fight. How to survive when survival seems mathematically impossible. How to look at something that terrifies you and find a weakness in it anyway. He paused. And we're offering to stand watch at the frontier, between Concordat space and whatever lives out there in the dark. Your scientists and diplomats can continue building bridges between civilizations. We will stand on the wall and make sure those bridges aren't burned by something neither of us has met yet. The room was very quiet. Seraphine looked at Eleanor, at Kellerman, at the humans who had survived the unsurvivable and come out the other side still believing in something larger than themselves. She thought of the Reapers, of 3 dormant facilities, of the darkness beyond the edge of known space. She thought of 51 first contacts, of 3,000 years of peace built on assumptions that had just proven dangerously incomplete. And she made a decision. I will present your offer to the Grand Council, she said, with my full endorsement and my testimony." Eleanor's expression softened. Relief, gratitude, hope. "Thank you, Ambassador." "Thank you," Seraphine replied, "for what you're offering to do, for what you've already endured, and for showing us what we should have seen 80 years ago." She stood, forearms moving in the formal gesture of respect her people reserved for those who had earned it through blood. "The Concordat will hear your story, and if I have any influence at all, they will understand what I now understand." "What's that?" Kellerman asked. "That we have been very fortunate, and that fortune does not last forever." She looked at the star map one more time, at the darkness waiting beyond the light. "It's time we learned to be more than lucky." As the Concordat delegation prepared to depart, Seraphine paused at the doorway, turned back. "The 3 dormant facilities. When were they discovered?" 18 months ago, Elena said. "The last one. And the energy readings? Fluctuating, slowly increasing over time. Our analysts believe they're in some kind of standby mode." "How long until they activate, if they activate?" Elena and Kellerman exchanged looks. "We don't know," Kellerman admitted. "Could be centuries, could be years, could be tomorrow." Seraphine nodded slowly. "Then let us hope," she said, "that the Grand Council votes quickly." She left. Behind her in the conference room, Eleanor Vasquez sat very still for a long moment. Then she opened a secure channel. "Science Division, this is the Secretary General, the 37th fluctuation. When was it detected?" A pause. "4 hours ago, ma'am." Elena closed her eyes. 37 fluctuations in 18 months, each one carrying slightly more energy than the last, following a curve that matched almost exactly the progression they had recorded 80 years ago, right before the Reapers woke up. "Keep monitoring. Report any change immediately." "Yes, ma'am." The channel closed. Eleanor sat in the empty room, looking at the star map, at the darkness beyond. Somewhere out there something was waking up. And this time humanity would not face it alone, if the vote came in time, if the Concordat understood, if fortune held just a little longer. She stood, straightened her uniform, and went to prepare for a war she hoped would never come, but knew in her bones was already on its way. The Grand Council chamber of the Galactic Concordat was the most impressive structure the Alliance had ever built. A vast dome of translucent crystalline material that allowed the stars to show through even in the artificial light of the interior, so that the representatives of 47 species were always reminded in every deliberation that their decisions mattered beyond any single world. It could hold thousands. Today it held them all. Every species had sent not just their ambassadors, but their military advisors, their senior scientists, their historians. Because what Ambassador Seraphine Thora had transmitted ahead of her return had made clear that this was not a routine membership discussion. This was something else entirely. Seraphine stood at the center of the chamber, alone, a single figure beneath a dome of stars. Around her, in concentric rings that rose toward the ceiling, sat representatives from 47 civilizations. Some humanoid, some decidedly not. Some that communicated through light, through sound, through pheromones that translation systems struggled to interpret, all of them watching her. She had done this before, presented new species to the Council, made the case for expansion, for inclusion, for adding another voice to the chorus. 51 times over 4 centuries. This time felt different. She activated the holographic display without preamble. No introduction, no careful diplomatic framing, just the footage. The chamber, which was never quiet, 47 species, produced a constant low symphony of breath and motion and translation devices processing continuously went completely silent. Not the polite quiet of attention, the deep quiet of shock. They watched the Second Battle of Mars, watched human ships burn, watched Deimos Station vaporize, watched 43,000 naval personnel and 60,000 civilians reduced to atoms in seconds. They watched the siege of Denver, the orbital bombardment, the firestorm, children in underground shelters while the world above them burned. They watched the 5-year war of attrition, 7 colonies destroyed, 30% of an entire species lost, ships fighting with weapons that stopped working after 3 uses because the enemy learned faster than humans could adapt. They watched humanity's desperate grinding refusal to die. When the footage ended, the silence held. Chancellor Vorenthal, eldest of the council leaders, a being whose people measured their age in geological epochs, sat for a very long time before speaking. His voice carried the resonance of deep age, of mountains speaking to one another. In 3,000 years we have maintained peace by ensuring that the civilizations within our care never face threats beyond their capacity to endure. We have been, I think, very proud of this. A pause that stretched like continental drift. Ambassador Thora, you have spent time with these humans. What is your honest assessment? Seraphine stepped forward into the light at the chamber's center. Chancellor, honored council members, I went to Earth expecting to find a promising young species at the beginning of its journey. Hopeful, perhaps a little frightened, eager to be welcomed into a community larger than themselves. She paused, gathered the words carefully. What I found was something I don't have a category for. In 51 first contacts. She looked around the chamber. Hundreds of faces, dozens of shapes, all watching. Humanity survived something that should have killed them, and the experience did not make them broken or fearful or aggressive. It made them clear. Her voice strengthened. They understand the universe in a way that we perhaps fortunately have not needed to understand. They know that peace is not a default state. It is a constructed thing, a maintained thing, something that requires active defense. She met the Chancellor's ancient eyes. They are not offering us warriors. They are not asking us to become an empire. They are offering to stand at the frontier and watch, so that what happened to them does not happen to us without warning, so that if something wakes up in the dark, we have time to prepare, rather than time only to grieve. From the upper tiers, a representative spoke. Coralis of the Cororin Collective, a species of linked hive minds who had never in their recorded history experienced interpersonal violence. But the warships. Coralis's voice was harmonics, layered over harmonics. Confusion made audible. The weapons, bringing that into concordat space, doesn't that fundamentally change what we are? Seraphine turned to face the speaker. The warships exist because the machines that killed 30% of humanity's population are still out there, dormant, potentially damaged beyond recovery, or potentially waiting in the way that machines can wait, without impatience, without error, without mercy. She paused. If they activate again, they will not restrict themselves to human space. Representative Coralis, they will come here. The chamber stirred. Conversations breaking out in a dozen languages, some species arguing for immediate acceptance, others expressing deep reservations. A few simply frightened by the sudden visceral understanding that the peace they had taken for granted was fragile. The debate lasted 7 hours. Arguments were made, objections examined, every fear aired and inspected under the harsh light of collective scrutiny.
Some species were enthusiastic, seeing in humanity's experience a confirmation of suspicions they had long held about the unexplored galaxy. Others were deeply reluctant, worried that admitting a militarized species as equal partner would fundamentally alter the character of the Concordat they had spent millennia building. When the vote was finally called, the chamber fell silent once more. Chancellor Vorenthal's voice echoed through the dome. All in favor of admitting humanity to full Concordat membership with equal status. The voting displays activated. Each species had their own method, some physical gestures, some light patterns, some chemical releases that sensors translated into yes or no. The results tabulated in real time. 39 species voted in favor, 5 abstained, 3 voted against, not unanimous. In 3,000 years of Concordat history, one of the closest votes ever recorded on a membership question. Chancellor Vorenthal sat forward, his ancient frame moving with the slow grace of tectonic plates shifting. And that is entirely appropriate. This decision should not have been easy. Decisions that change the fundamental nature of who we are should never be easy. He looked toward where Seraphine stood, then beyond her to the holographic display where Secretary-General Elena Vasquez and Admiral Drayton Kellerman appeared via quantum-entangled transmission. Welcome to the galactic Concordat humanity. Welcome as equals, welcome as partners. A pause. The old being's eyes, which had seen civilizations rise and fall, held something that looked like hope. And may whatever you have seen in the dark never reach the light of our shared home. The chamber erupted. Not in cheers exactly. 47 different species expressing relief, concern, hope, fear in 47 different ways. A symphony of reaction that was beautiful in its chaos. Elena Vasquez, standing in a war room 80 light-years away, closed her eyes for just a moment. When she opened them, Admiral Kellerman was watching her. "We're in," she said quietly. "We're in," he confirmed. And on Earth, on Mars, on the orbital stations and colony worlds and outposts scattered across human space, people who had survived the unsurvivable allowed themselves for the first time in 82 years to believe that they might not have to face the next nightmare alone. 1 month later, space above Unity Station held an image that would become iconic. 2 ships in parallel formation, side by side, matched velocity, perfect synchronization. The Harmony's voice, sleek and silver, its hull etched with the symbols of 17 species over 3,000 years of shared history. Elegant, diplomatic, built for peace. And beside it, the USS Indomitable, 12 kilometers of matte black armor and weapon systems, angular, brutal, built for war. The contrast was striking. The photograph transmitted to every Concordat world and every human colony became something more than an image. It became a statement. 2 philosophies, 1 mission. On the bridge of the Harmony's voice, Seraphine stood at the observation window and watched their escort with different eyes than she had a month ago. A month ago, the Indomitable had been a revelation that shattered every assumption she had made. A thing of terror and confusion. Now it was something else. Cale stood beside her. The young officer had changed over the past weeks. The bright certainty of youth had been tempered by understanding. He still believed in the Concordat, but he believed differently now. "It's strange," he said quietly. "A month ago that ship terrified me. The moment it dropped out of FTL, I genuinely thought we were going to die." "And now?" Seraphine asked. He considered it seriously, carefully. "Now I find it reassuring. I keep thinking about Captain Strauss's briefing, about the patrol routes along the frontier, about the things they detected in the outer reaches that they can't identify yet. pause. I'm glad she's out there. I'm glad it's them and not us. The first time something wakes up. That is precisely what they intended, Seraphine said. Not to frighten us, to free us. To free us to continue being what we're good at because they will handle what we're not. She turned from the window. The galaxy is vast, Kael. We have mapped a fraction of it and called it safe. And for 3,000 years that was true. But the unmapped parts were always there. The things in them were always there. The Concordate's gift to itself was not eliminating those dangers. It was simply not knowing about them yet. The communication system chimed. A woman appeared on the screen, stern-faced, grey streaks in dark hair pulled back in military fashion. A scar visible on her right forearm. The kind of burn that came from plasma weapons at close range. Captain Rebecca Strauss, commander of the USS Indomitable. She had the quality of stillness that Seraphine had come to recognize as the human military version of complete composure. The kind of calm that came from seeing the worst the universe could offer and choosing to keep standing anyway. Ambassador Thora, Indomitable is ready to jump on your signal. All battle group ships report ready status. Seraphine straightened, forearms moving in formal acknowledgement. Thank you, Captain. And Captain Strauss, I want to say something clearly because I'm not certain I said it adequately before. You and your crew are choosing to go to the frontier, to stand between the known and unknown so that 48 civilizations can sleep more safely. That is not a small thing. Strauss's expression softened. Fractionally. Not much, but enough to show the human underneath the armor. Ambassador, with respect, it's exactly the thing. It's the only thing that matters. She paused. My crew and I have been waiting 20 years for the Concordat to know we exist, because we've always known that what we're doing right now together, is the only real answer to what's out there. Another pause. It's an honor to finally do it alongside you. Seraphine felt something warm spreading through her chest, an emotion she couldn't quite name. Gratitude, perhaps, or hope. The honor, Captain, is genuinely mutual. Strauss nodded once. Sharp, military. On your signal, Ambassador. Engage when ready, Captain. The two ships activated their FTL drives simultaneously. Space didn't tear this time. It bent smoothly, a cooperative negotiation between mass and space-time. The kind of fold that left no scars. Twin flashes of brilliant blue-white light erupted from the drives. Brief, beautiful. Visible from Earth's surface to anyone who happened to be looking at the right piece of sky at the right moment. And then both ships vanished. Destination far beyond the edge of explored space, where no star charts existed and no Concordate beacon had ever been placed, where humanity had been watching the dark alone for 40 years. Now they would watch together, far beyond the edge of known space where darkness stretched between stars like an ocean without shores. 3 structures sat in the cold. They had been there for a very long time. Ancient beyond the Concordate's 3,000 years. Ancient beyond humanity's 10,000 years of recorded civilization. Ancient in the way that geological formations are ancient, in the way that the darkness between galaxies is ancient. Shaped by processes that had completed long before the first ancestor of any current species looked up at a night sky and wondered what lived there. They were damaged, not destroyed. Their creators, whatever they had been, were gone. Dust and memory, but the structures remained. Patient, waiting. Deep in the crystalline lattice of their dormant systems, processes that had been sleeping for millennia stirred at irregular intervals, tiny fluctuations, almost imperceptible, like the twitch of a dreaming predator. Each fluctuation was separated from the others by centuries. Each one carried slightly more energy than the last. A pattern was emerging. If anything had been watching closely enough and long enough, they would have recognized it. Something was coming back. In the integrated command center at the heart of Unity Station, now expanded and rebuilt its walls, bearing the insignia of 48 species rather than one, Admiral Drayton Kellerman stood before a holographic display that covered an entire wall. He stared at a readout that had arrived via tight beam relay from the USS Eternal Vigil, currently on frontier patrol in the outer reaches. 700 light-years from Earth, the readout showed a power fluctuation, small, brief, easily dismissed as sensor noise. Except that this was the 37th such fluctuation recorded from that specific location in 18 months, and the progression of energy levels fit a curve that the Eternal Vigil's tactical AI had flagged with a 3-word note. Pattern recognized. Precedent crisis. Kellerman stood very still, looking at those 3 words. The same 3 words that had appeared 82 years ago, right before 5,000 Reaper units had emerged from a facility that should have been extinct. He stood there for a long moment. Then he reached for the communication system. "Get me Ambassador Thora, and get me Chancellor Vorenthal." A pause. "And someone tell the Indomitable to redirect to these coordinates." He transmitted the location data. 700 light-years, the edge of everything humanity had mapped. His aide looked at the coordinates, then at the Admiral. "Sir, that's weeks of travel time. If we're wrong about this..." "We're not wrong." Kellerman's voice was flat, final. "I've seen this pattern before. 82 years ago, right before everything went to hell." He looked at the display one more time, at the curve of energy readings climbing exponentially, at the AI's assessment that matched almost exactly the pre-crisis data. "We're not wrong," he repeated. "We're just hoping we're early enough this time." Far away in the cold between stars, something flickered. Inside Structure Alpha, a corridor that had been dark for 10,000 years suddenly wasn't. A single indicator light, deep red, pulsing slowly. 47 kilometers away in Structure Beta, another light answered, the same deep red, the same slow pulse. In Structure Gamma, a third light joined the rhythm. The interval between pulses was decreasing. Not quickly, but measurably. Something that had been sleeping was testing its systems, charging its reactors, remembering with the perfect memory of machines what it had been built to do. Replicate, expand, eliminate. For 10,000 years, it had done none of these things. Damage had forced dormancy. But damage could be repaired. Systems could be restored. Protocols could resume. The structures had 3 primary objectives encoded into their deepest logic. 1, survive. 2, replicate. 3, eliminate biological competition. They had survived. Now they were preparing to do the rest. Deep space. Frontier zone. 700 light-years from Earth. The Harmony's voice and the USS Indomitable flew in perfect formation, side by side. 2 ships that represented 2 entirely different approaches to the universe, learning to move as one. On the bridge of the Harmony's voice, Seraphine stood at the forward observation window, watching the stars ahead. Not the familiar mapped catalogued stars of Concordat space, the raw and unnamed stars of the frontier, burning without witnesses in systems no one had visited. Kyle stood beside her during the long transit periods. It had become something of a ritual. "Strange," he said quietly. "I used to think the galaxy was a place that simply existed, something to move through, full of civilizations and wonders, but essentially stable, essentially knowable." Pause. "Now I think it's alive," Not in the way planets are alive or stars, but in the sense that it has processes. Things that happen regardless of what we intend. Things that don't negotiate. He looked at her. Humanity knew this already, didn't they? Before we met them. That's what the crisis taught them. Yes. Seraphine's voice was quiet. It taught them that the universe does not promise anything, that safety is not the natural order, that peace is not guaranteed, that survival requires not only the will to survive, but the preparation for the specific shape of the threat. She paused. It is a terrible thing to know, but it is better to know it. The communication system chimed. Incoming message. Priority encryption. Seraphine pulled up the transmission. It was from Admiral Kellerman, already decoded, already confirmed authentic. She read it once, read it again. The 37th fluctuation. The progression curve. 3 dormant facilities showing coordinated power increases. And 3 words from a tactical AI that had been programmed by people who had survived the last time. Pattern recognized. Precedent crisis. She stood very still for a moment. Somewhere in the vast architecture of her 430-year life, something shifted, settled into a place she recognized. Not fear, not despair, but the particular clear-eyed calm that comes when uncertainty ends and the real work begins. She pressed the ship-wide communication key. All hands, this is the ambassador. We have received new intelligence regarding anomalous activity in the outer frontier. We are redirecting to rendezvous with elements of the human defense fleet. Pause. This is what we train for. This is why the partnership was built. The galaxy is wide and old and full of things that predate us all. Today we go to look at one of them. Another pause. And we go together. She opened a channel to the USS Indomitable. Captain Strauss appeared on the screen. She had already received the message. Seraphine could see it in her eyes. The recognition, the readiness, the look of someone who had been waiting for a call they always knew would come. Captain, Seraphine said, "Are you ready?" Strauss glanced aside. A brief look at something off-screen. Her crew, her ship. 300 years of human military engineering built specifically for this moment. She looked back. "Ambassador," she said, and there was something in her voice that made Seraphine's 2 hearts beat faster. Not fear, certainty. We were born ready. The 2 ships turned together in the dark. Behind them, 48 civilizations slept under stars that never seemed quite so full of possibility. Or quite so full of shadow. Ahead, the frontier waited. Immense. Unmapped. Ancient beyond reckoning. Keeping its secrets a little longer. But not forever. The Harmony's voice and the USS Indomitable jumped forward into the unknown. Together, side by side, the Guardian and the Diplomat, the sword and the voice. Proof that the answer to the terrifying vastness of the universe was not to retreat from it, but to face it in the company of others. Each one carrying what the other could not. Each one completing what the other alone could never be. The darkness ahead was deep and old and full of sleeping things. But at the edge of it now stood watchmen. And the watchmen were no longer alone. 700 light-years away in the cold between stars, the 38th fluctuation registered. Stronger than the 37th. The interval between pulses decreased again. Inside Structure Alpha systems that had been dormant for 10,000 years began the final stages of reactivation. In Structure Beta manufacturing bays that had not operated since before the first human looked up at the stars started preparing for production. In Structure Gamma, weapons systems ran diagnostic checks with the patience of machines that had all the time in the world. They were waking up. And this time, when they opened their eyes, they would not find humanity alone and screaming into the void. They would find humanity standing shoulder to shoulder with 47 other species. They would find a galaxy that had finally learned the lesson humanity had paid for in blood. That peace requires vigilance. That safety requires preparation. That the darkness at the edge of known space does not respect borders or treaties or prayers. It only respects strength, and the strength to face it together. The Reapers were waking, but so was the galaxy. And this time the galaxy was ready.